हेलो एंड वेलकम टू कंप्यूटरोलॉजी एकेडमी। और आज हम लोग डिस्कस करेंगे, टुडे वी आर गोइंग टू डिस्कस अबाउट द अटैक ऑफ रशिया ऑन यूक्रेन एंड व्हाट डज रशिया वांट्स टू अचीव through this attack. What is the historical underpinning, what is the motive, as the caption here says, the real motive of Russia. Why did Russia attack Ukraine? So all these questions, all these perspectives will be discussed here, and from the international relations perspective, from the UPSC paper 2, as well as from the perspective of other civil services exams and the competitive exams, this topic becomes very important. So watch the video till the end so that various things will be clear to you. So here, first of all, the Russian motive is to ensure the security of the Russia, the frontiers of Russia. Basically, what is the issue here? That Russia is trying to thwart the activities, trying to thwart the attempts of the Western allies to pose a security threat to Russia. So here, Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, has clearly mentioned it, made a statement that no West-sponsored military facility should be there in any country which were earlier the part of USSR, as many of the country, basically 3 countries, have joined the NATO, who were already earlier, before 1991, they were part of USSR, but after the disintegration of USSR in 1991, around 15 countries came into existence. Out of that, 3 countries have already joined the NATO, and Ukraine was trying to join the NATO. They were continuously pleading to the Western allies and the NATO to accommodate Ukraine also in the NATO. And that is why Sergei Lavrov has made this statement, so that none of the other countries should join the NATO. And next is here, removal of US nuclear weapons from the European continent. Basically, other than United States, various other states are also having the nuclear weapons, but the United States nuclear weapons are more potent, more dangerous, and they are having a higher range. And that is why Russia feels threatened out of the nuclear weapons which are already stationed, already established in the European continent. And that is why Russia wants that these nuclear weapons should be removed from the European continent, right? Next is that no further advancement of NATO eastward, that is towards Russian borders. Basically, after the coming of into the existence of NATO, many of the different countries have joined the NATO with the passage of time, and gradually these countries were in the Eastern European region made the advancement of NATO towards Russia, which pose a threat, security threat to Russia. Basically, Russia thinks that it security threat to Russia's own existence, and that is why they want that no further extension of the NATO grouping should be towards Russia, and that is what they mention here. And next is that while I am going through this video, recording this video, telling this video live, there is a news that now Russia is planning to attack Moldova, as per the video that has leaked from the Belarusian president's preaching, right? His briefing was that the Ukraine will be divided into 4 parts and next target is Moldova. And here, if we see the next slide here, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, these 3 countries which were earlier the part of USSR have now joined the NATO. And here you can see that they share the border with Russia. So already Russia is feeling threatened, and if Ukraine would have joined it, then only buffer state between the NATO and the Russian border for a short span of the Russian border would have left was Belarus, as well as Sweden and Finland has also been threatened by Russian president that they should not attempt to join the NATO, otherwise they will also have to face the consequences. So this was a clear threat given to these countries by the Russian president. And as we see here the map, here you can see that all the major countries or even the smaller countries are part of NATO, and that is why Russia feels threatened. Even here if you see in the Black Sea region, Turkey is the founding member of NATO, and from here also Russia can be attacked using the missile quite easily, and that is why Russia feels threatened. Next, if you see why Ukraine was targeted, why this was the target, basically through this Russia wants to send a strong message to the Western allies and the other countries who are attempting to join the NATO or the European Union. And while going on live in this video, next the new news is there that Ukraine had asked the European Union to accommodate Ukraine in the European Union, and they have accepted the request of Ukraine to accommodate Ukraine in the European Union, and the emergency provisions, emergency process, advanced process to accommodate Ukraine in the European Union have already been started. So again this will be a threat. So basically here the tug of war is going on between Russia and Ukraine and the Western allies, and the pawn between the war of the Western allies and the Russia has become the Ukraine. And here if we see the acquisitions that were made by Russia on Ukraine, on the ground of which Russia has attacked Ukraine, is that first they said that there was attempt made by Ukraine to acquire the nuclear weapons. And as we know that before the disintegration of USSR, Ukraine was the main base for the development of nuclear weapons and other things, and the largest chunk of the nuclear weapons was stored in Ukraine even after the disintegration of USSR. Ukraine was having around 1800 nuclear weapons, but at that time what was the situation there, that the government in Ukraine was having the proximity to the Russian government. They were in close contact with the Russian government, and when the Russian government convinced them that we will ensure your security, then they had transferred the nuclear weapons to Russia. And even now the Chernobyl is still the facility from where Ukraine is capable of developing the nuclear weapons. Technologically, all the things are already with Ukraine, right? Because already there were nuclear establishments before the disintegration of USSR which are existent over there. So here they are already having the capacity to develop the nuclear weapons as well as the delivery system. Like as we see time and again that the nuclear triad. So basically if you develop a nuclear bomb, a nuclear weapon, then there should be some mechanism to place it, to throw it on, to bombard it on the target. So it may be through air, it may be through land, or it may be through naval system. And that is what it is called, the triad, through which the nuclear weapon could be delivered on the target, right? So here Ukraine is having the capacity to deliver that also. They are already having the technologies and all those things, as well as they have the capacity to develop it also. And that is why Russia is fearful of Ukraine. And if they will come into the close alliance with the Western countries, then it will be a matter of concern for Russia, what Russia is saying. But if we come to the international norms, then having a nuclear weapon not necessarily means that that country will become the threat to the neighboring countries. It is not necessary. Basically, nuclear weapons were used as a necessary evil, right? A necessary thing to make a threat, so that the other nations will not attack on that particular nation, right? Because it will ensure the mutual destruction, right? And here the proximity to the west was one of the major acquisition, that Ukraine is drifting towards the western allies, through which Russia was feeling that its security could be jeopardized. And that is why Russia is time and again trying to pull Ukraine away from the Western allies, because the fight of Russia and the Western allies is not a new thing. Since after the conclusion of the World War II, the Cold War era had started, and since then they are fighting with each other. चूहे बिल्ली का खेल 36 का आंकड़ा बहुत पहले से चला आ रहा है, right? And that is the situation. Next is that Ukraine shares border with Russia and many other countries, as we have seen already. Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia have already joined the NATO, and Russia feels threatened out of that, because the military bases of NATO can be erected over there. And so same situation would have happened in Ukraine also, right? And next is unfavorable regime since 2014. Since 2014, in the 2014 year, what happened? Petro Poroshenko had came to power. He was not so pro-Russia, but after the Crimea issue and after several rounds of discussion and the agreements, he would have got tilted a bit towards Russia. But later on, he was also removed. He was a business baron who was corrupt, and on that ground, what happened? Zelensky won the presidential election, but he is a staunch opposer of Russia. He is not even showing any kind of concern towards the Russian position, Russian threat perception. He is of the view that there should be development in Ukraine. Ukraine should have a close tie with the European nations, NATO, and the Western allies, and that is the reason why Russia feels threatened out of that, right? Next is to send a strong message. This is the major thing, that Western allies should not try to advance towards Russia. They should not try to threaten Russia, so that they should avert any attempt out of this attack. They should get a lesson, they should get a message that Russia is not going to overlook their attempt to jeopardize the security, to pose a threat to the Russian security, right? And next is historical link. What is the historical link? Why does Russia is so staunchly opposed to the Western allies? This is a big question. So here, as we have read in the history also, that there was a Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. Basically, at that very time, Nikita Khrushchev, one of the firemen, one of the aggressive man who was leading the Russian government, who was the president of Russia at that very time, right? And at that very time, the United States president was JFK, John F. Kennedy. He was also a young president who was also having the young blood, who was also completely opposed to Russia. So what had happened? Basically, there was a nuclear establishment erected in Cuba. Cuba was facing the threat out of the US attack. The Pigs Bay invasion had already been thwarted. There were various situations, and tug of war was constantly going on between the newly established regime of Fidel Castro and the US government. And basically, Fidel Castro was not pro-US. So what he thought? He thought that if we will show the allegiance to the communism, then we will be helped out by Russia. Basically, वहां पर सीधा ये फंडा चल रहा था, दुश्मन का दुश्मन दोस्त होता है. That was the situation which Fidel Castro used to his advantage, and out of that he got the help from Russia, because Russia was also looking for an opportunity to pose a threat to Russian United States security, because before 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, already Russia, United States had established its nuclear weapon arsenal. Its missiles had been already placed in Turkey and Italy, and those were pointed towards Russia. So already Russia was fearful out of this missile. So Russia was constantly saying that United States should remove these missiles, nuclear missiles, from Turkey and Italy. And Russia found this as a conducive situation when it can put the nuclear missiles close to Russia, not close to Russia, close to United States, so that United States will also feel threatened out of the Russian nuclear weapons from Cuba. And thereafter, what happened? They came to the negotiation, and they removed, United States removed its missiles from Turkey. And this was the situation when the Cold War era was at its lowest point. There were all the possibilities of a nuclear warfare, and that is why already Russia is against the United States, because such kind of advantage is now not with Russia, so that Russia can threaten United States, so that they will not attempt to advance towards the Russian border using the NATO and the nuclear weapons and other things. And that is why they started to attack on Ukraine, who was attempting to be the part of NATO, and already they are going to be accommodated in the European Union. And now we have to see what would be the next step of Russia, because if the Ukraine will get the membership of European Union, then there will be flood of help from the European Union countries. They will provide Ukraine with weapons and the money and every kind of the help that would be possible with the European Union, right? And if we see that, what kind of old pride and position does Russia want to reclaim? So before 1991, before the disintegration of USSR, the world was bipolar world, right? Two major powers, two world powers were existent over there at that very time. One was USSR and another was United States. But after the disintegration of USSR in 1991, gradually the world got converted into unipolar world, right? Only major power left out in the world was United States. China was a rising giant, China was a rising tiger, because economically at that very time China was not so strong. So China used to keep aside from this kind of world politics. पहले पैसा कमा लो, पैसा आएगा तो ताकत भी आ जाएगी. देखिए, अगर ताकत होगी तो पैसा आ जाएगा, और पैसा होगा तो ताकत आ जाएगी. Both of them are complementary to each other, right? So China was basically trying to achieve the economic power, so that they will be in position to be the world power in the military context also, muscle context also, right? And that is what nowadays we are seeing with China. So here Russia had lost its pride of being a world power in 1991, and after that there was a unipolar world. But what happened after 1991? Putin was very disheartened, he was very depressed. He was in the context endeavor to make Russia a superpower again. So in the 1990s he came to politics, leaving out the KGB. Before that he was a spy, and once a spy is always a spy. So when he formed his government in USSR, he accommodated all his former spy colleagues in the government, and he ran the government in a dictatorship way. Whenever, at whatever post he used to be, he tried to accommodate, he tried to concentrate all the power at that post, and since then he is in power. But after 2000s, after the 10 years of disintegration of the USSR gradually started to get uplifted. Its position started to get increased gradually. And what was the situation? Even after the disintegration of USSR, most of the former USSR countries were in close contact with the Russian government. They were constantly taking the decisions of the Russian government as their own decision. They were fulfilling the demands of Russian government. They were helping out the Russian government, like what Belarus is doing right now. These things were done by those countries who had came into existence after the disintegration of USSR. But gradually what happened, due to the communism, due to the communist type of government, their development was not so good, and they started to drift towards the Western allies gradually, because they were helping out, the Western allies were helping out these countries with money and many other things. And they were getting the market also for their product. They were experiencing the industrial development because of getting the access to the European and the Western markets. And that is why the former USSR countries started to drift towards the Western allies, and gradually they experienced the economic development, right? And what happens, भैया पैसा बहुत बड़ी चीज है, ठीक है, and that is the situation. So पैसा आने लगा, so they get allured towards the Western allies, and they started to join the NATO, the European Union, and all those kind of political agreements started to get concluded between the former USSR countries and the Western allies. But after 2004, 2014, Russia got infuriated. And why Russia got infuriated? Because before 2014 in Ukraine also pro-Russia government was there, but after 2014 election, Petro Poroshenko came to the power, and he started the negotiation with the Western allies to get accommodated in the NATO, to get the membership of EU, and all those kind of political negotiations started between the Western Union, Western allies, and the Ukraine. And that is why Russia thought that the last nation who was in favor of Russia, which is sharing the border with Russia, is drifting towards the Western allies, and they started to threaten Ukraine. First of all, they annexed Crimea, which was gifted to Ukraine by the Russian government itself, but later on Putin annexed it, that we had gifted you in the good gesture, but you are posing a threat to us, so we are taking it back. Thereafter, they started to ensue the instability in the Eastern European Ukrainian region, where there is dominance of the Russian population. Those are having the close contact with the Russian population. They are pro-Russia, like Donetsk and Luhansk. And even then, Russia was not able to bend the Ukrainian government to make them to submit, to make them submissive to the Russian government, and that is why now they started to attack. Now they started the complete invasion of Ukraine, so that they will send a strong message to Western allies. However, again, to deter the Western allies to support the Ukraine, now again the news has surfaced right now that the Russian foreign minister has clearly mentioned it, that if there will be any third world war, then it will be devastating not for the region only, but it will be devastating for the whole world. So the Western allies should restrain themselves from interfering into the affairs of Russia and into the Ukraine and Russian matter. However, opposite to that, already the European Union have ensured the emergency provisions to accommodate Ukraine in the European Union, and let us see what would be the future course of this war, and what would be the future course of the diplomacy between the Western allies, European Union, Russia and Ukraine. Because basically out of all these geopolitical issues, all this geopolitical tug of war, the main sufferer is Ukraine and the population living over there. They have to flee their own country, they are getting killed, they are living in the constant fear of getting killed out of this war. So this is not a good situation for the common people, and out of the fight of the dominant people, out of the fight of the politicians, the main sufferers become the common people, right? And last but not the least, I would like to inform you all that the General Studies Foundation course have been announced by the Computology IS Academy, and this is the foundation course for civil services exam that will be conducted in 2023, and this course is going to start on 28th of March 2022. And here the prelims comes mains holistic syllabus will be covered, and the notes will be also provided, and you will find the constant hand holding and personal mentoring till the final selection. And for the further details, you may get in touch with us on this mobile number and WhatsApp number. You can also contact us on this landline number. And if you want the information through the email, you can mail us. The mail ID is provided in the description below. You can also follow us on our social media handles. This is for Facebook and Instagram. This is our Telegram channel where also the syllabus will be uploaded, and this is our website from where you can easily go on to register for the courses. Also, you can download the detailed syllabus, the whole course plan, and all those kind of things. And for such kind of informative videos, do subscribe our channel and press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new videos. Thank you very much and have a nice day.